Hello, in this tutorial I will show you how to create a classic oil painting using simple techniques. I will be using the stylistic elements of Chiaroscuro and Sfumato. For this demonstration I used a limited palette of colors. For the underpainting, black and white, and for the glazes only 5 colors. Raw Sienna, Alizarin crimson, Ultramarine blue, burnt umber and a Scarlet lake in one glaze which is slightly warmer than Alizarin. An essential aspect is the old master technique I use whereby I separate form and color. The underpainting is a Grisaille painted only with white and black colors. This is followed by color in the form of transparent glazes. A special technique I use here is to work white paint into the wet glaze. This technique is known from the Venetian school or, for example, from Caravaggio. I paint exclusively without solvents. This technique can be used in your living spaces without hesitation. I use graham walnut alkyd medium as a glaze medium. Another advantage of this modern alternative is that the glazes dry fairly quickly and you are ready for the next coat. Since I'm lazy, I use pre-mixed shades of grey for the Grisaille. You can find a video on my channel showing how I do this. For the underpainting I like to use Raphael Mongoose brushes or a synthetic version from Vinci and Newton. For the glazing I use softer brushes. I paint on a black canvas because I don't like painting on white canvas. The black canvas was just lying around here, but you can also paint on white or any other color primer. Many people use earth tones or muted orange. So, let's go! This is my reference photo which I downloaded from Flickr. Thank you Rachel for this nice photo. I equip my palette with the grayscale paints and use the strip with tonal values to find a suitable tonal value. My goal here is to create a very accurate Grisaille painting. All the mistakes I avoid here will make my work with the glazes easier later on. Sometimes it is a good idea to rotate the canvas to make it easier to paint edges. The many tonal values on the back of a hand can sometimes seem complicated, and it's easy to get lost in them. Here it helps not to look at the hand, but rather to follow abstract shapes. Here I use a soft brush with pony hair to blend after applying the paint. Okay, the first hand is done. Here I show how I place tones from my premixed tubes next to each other, then blend them and mix them on the canvas. As you can see, I apply the paint quite thinly. In my opinion, highly pigmented paints are helpful here, and the low oil content makes the glazes easier to apply. I will show and explain this later. Both hands done. So now we go to the Grisaille painting of the clothes, and that is also great fun to paint. This is easier than painting hands, as clothes can fall in many different ways. This is a great exercise for painting tonal values with abstract forms. I took a day off here, but with the premix paints it's easy to pick up where you left off with the right tonal values. I paint the edges very precisely because it's difficult to correct this with glazes. So the Grisaille underpainting is done, and I let it dry for a few days or for a week. It's summer here, it's hot, and maybe it's dry to the touch in 3 or 4 days. And then I will start with glazing. In my opinion, these Grisaille paintings are an artwork for itself, but the color is nice too. I paint the first glazing layer with Alizarin Crimson Red to achieve a slight purple shimmer later on. But first I apply a very thin layer of glazing medium to the canvas. That isn't essential, but Alizarin is very pigmented and I can paint on this oily layer with very little paint. I wipe the medium off again with the lint-free cloth to obtain a very thin film. With this you can also check whether your Grisaille was dry enough. A very thin layer of paint on the palette. Some paint got on the hand, but the red paint can still be wiped off easily. These are the paints for the first glaze on the hands, and I'll show you this in a bit more detail. The first glaze is a mix of 3 colors: raw sienna, alizarin and ultramarine blue. The white is a lead white substitute, which is easier to work with than normal titanium white. The ultramarine blue and the alizarin are transparent paints, and the raw sienna light from Old Holland is a semi-transparent paint. It is important to use this glaze medium very sparingly in order to create stable color films. I also use the paint very sparingly, which is historically accurate as pigments and paints were very expensive in earlier centuries. In this mix, my goal is to create an orange color from the raw sienna and the alizarin red, and then tone it down with a complementary color blue. This gives me a beautiful skin tone. I check the color as a glaze on a grey toned paper. And then I check highlighting with white paint. Now I apply the mix to the Grisaille. As you can see, with such a thin application it is not completely even, as the oil in the Grisaille can repel the paint. The leaner the Grisaille, the less it repels the glaze. This effect can also be remedied by lightly roughening the underlying layer of paint with the raw side of a kitchen sponge. Or it can also be done with solvent, but you have to be very careful. I spread a very thin semi-transparent film on the palette to gently work the white paint into the glaze. This works best with historical accurate lead white, but the substitute from Gamblin also works nice. For this I use a pony hair brushes again. You should wipe the brush repeatedly, otherwise it will retain mixed colors. This type of brush also becomes clogged with paint over time, which is why you should use a fresh brush after a while. As you can see here, beautiful sfumato effects can be achieved with this technique, even with the first coat of glaze. So that's for today. First glazing layers are done. One to the clothes in Alizarin and one to the hands with skin tones and white highlighting. I'll let it dry a few days and then starting the next layer, an ultramarine on the clothes, and next flesh tone glazing where I start to intense the darks and the shadows. Now I apply a glaze with ultramarine blue. I apply the blue more heavily than the red because I only want to achieve a subtle purple effect. So the ultramarine glazing layer is done and the painting starts to glow. This is an effect you can only achieve with glazing, one layer over another. Here the ultramarine blue over the Alizarin red. It's hard to achieve such effect with direct painting or with opaque colors, or it's not possible in my opinion. So next I will bring back some highlights with a bit of white paint into the wet glazing layer. By working the white paint into the fabric, you can influence the appearance of the material. A shinier, silkier fabric with sharper edges and more reflections, or a soft cotton fabric with gentle gradients. To enhance the shadow areas on the skin, I mix a glaze color from ultramarine blue and burnt umber. Earth colors such as burnt umber sometimes have the tendency to look a little harsh at first, but this fades somewhat as they dry. Sometimes you don't have to be afraid to use your fingers to blend colors. A beautiful sfumato effect can be created by alternating between partially applied shadow glazes and glazes with white highlighting. So, second glazing on the hands is done. I paint another layer of ultramarine blue onto the clothes to enhance the depth effect and the glow. In the deep shadows of the cloth, I paint a little alizarin red to make the clothes a little more vibrant. But I have to say it's hard to see in the video. And again, the paint spreads thinly on the palette. Here I use a very small brush for fine details with the white paint. So the glazing on the clothes is finished, and next is the glaze applied to the hands again to intensify the sfumato. I use a similar mix to the first glaze on the hands, but now I added transparent scarlet red to create an effect that used to be achieved with vermilion red. The scarlet red is significantly warmer and more orange than the alizarin. Yes, it looks very orange now, but trust the process. The white will turn it into skin tone and the grey shadows will add warmth. This is not the approach used in modern painting for skin tones, but I want to achieve a result here that is reminiscent of Caravaggio's paintings, even though the paint there was aged over centuries. And again a dark mix of blue and burnt umber, but I will also use a mix from the last glaze on the skin again. For this purpose I covered the palette with cling film and stored it in the refrigerator. Thin paint. Too much paint on the brush, I'll wipe it away. I'm still improving a few bright areas. For this tutorial I'll leave the painting as it is for now. Of course you can pay even more attention to the details, but I think the essential techniques such as Grisaille, Glazing, white highlighting, Chiaroscuro and Sfumato have become clear. So before you go, I appreciate it if you could support my channel with a like or subscription. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions please write them in the comments.